Is Zach Sieler holding out on the Miami Dolphins for a contract extension? We will discuss that today as we dive in too deep with myself and Neal Driscoll. Also, Miami Dolphins add some interior defensive line depth. ESPN lists a bunch of hypothetical trades for Jalen Ramsey, but are any of them good enough or realistic to accept? We will talk about all of that and much more. Do me the favor, smash the like button. Subscribe if you are new. And as always, let's get into this one.
Loses the football. Touchdown! Got it! You have got to be kidding me. Jalen Waddle has a Dolphin touchdown. And he will score! Field down the near side, man open. Touchdown! The run from Tua Tagovailoa. Touchdown! He's going deep. He's got it over the touchdown again. Beautiful day to be a Dolphin fan. Let's go!
You're listening to Fin Too Deep.
Tua back to throw. Blitz coming. They get to him. No, he takes off running. And he's in. Touchdown, Miami.
With the sixth pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Miami Dolphins select Jalen Waddle.
Giving you unfiltered, informed, and controversial takes on the Miami Dolphins and the NFL Draft. Here's Reason and Neal.
What is good, Fin Nation? What's good? It's your boy Reason. And we are back here for another one. Appreciate all of y'all coming through. A little late just because, hey, me and Neal were catching up, and then he went ahead and decided to drop his phone. And so Neal's feeling it right now, right? Send him some love in the chat. But guys, we are about 5 days from mandatory minicamp starting up for the Miami Dolphins. Next Tuesday is when it begins. OTAs have continued on. Jalen Wright was the man in the orange jersey. How you feeling about a week and a half into OTAs, Neal, with everything you've been hearing? Zach Wilson has displayed some of that arm talent. Tua looked on point during the rain. Grayson Murphy is just a pressure machine like he was at UCLA. A lot of stuff going on. Jalen Waddle and those new glasses the receivers are using to help with their coordination and catching footballs. How are you feeling with all the reports coming out of OTA so far?
Yeah, man, and starting the day off with a new cracked iPhone screen here, which is going to cost me a few bills, but it's all good. Here's the thing, man. Win, lose, or draw, they break your heart. They frustrate the shit out of you. But outside of my family, there's nothing more I enjoy than Miami Dolphins football. Like, it is what it is. When it starts, and and even if the shells are just on, that little taste brings you ready for football season. And here we sit, first week of June. It's going to be the preseason here before we know it, right? And things, bullets are going to fly. The two big takeaways that I have this week are that I think, first off, Jalen Waddle's primed, I think, to have that season we've all been anticipating. We always talk about the health of, Tua Tagovailoa and Bradley Chubb. He hasn't maybe suffered a significant injury, but Jalen Waddle has had little, things here and there that have kept him out of the lineup. He's kind of played a little bit of a second fiddle since Tyreek Hill arrived, which, obviously is no surprise. Like, that's almost anyone's going to do that. This is the season where I think that he's going to pull ahead in this offense of Tyreek Hill. And I don't think it's just because of the off-field antics of Tyreek Hill. I think it's one of those things where Father Time always wins. And I don't think Tyreek's ancient, but I think every NFL season that goes onto your body, you slow down a little bit, right? Like, I think that this is probably as fresh as we're going to see Waddle here for some time. You know, he probably is going to be playing with a chip on his shoulder, and I think it's going to be an awesome season for him. And then the other guy, you know, our first round pick from last year, Chop Robinson. I mean, he's oozing confidence out there. He's getting more physical, you know, from an actual physical standpoint, building muscle mass. Like, he looks explosive, and now, like last year, he had to be the guy as a rookie. Now he's going to have a rotation that doesn't just have Jalen Phillips. It doesn't just have Bradley Chubb. You just mentioned it, Murphy, right? Like Murphy's going to take Quentin Bell's roster spot. Like, we can put the cart before the horse here. And then I'm also expecting a leap from Mo Kamara. He's a talented guy, man. So I think this Miami Dolphin pass rush is absolutely, and we can always put health pending, and you can say that about everything. I'm going to assume health because, why wouldn't you, right? And I think that Chop Robinson is going to escalate into one of the upper tier pass rushers in this league pretty quickly here over the next year or two. And double-digit sacks, I think, is really attainable. Because the one thing, there was times where he didn't set the edges as consistent as you wanted. I'll be honest. I want him to be adequate there, but the Dolphins didn't draft him to set the edge. They drafted him to get to the quarterback, to be electric. And he's a guy that just doesn't make sacks, man. He makes a lot of plays behind the line of scrimmage. So, I'm excited about those two. And then, one thing I want to do is give a shout out to Terran Armstead, who officially got put on the June 1st retire reserve list, because it wasn't always pretty. There was a lot of missed time due to injuries, but that guy, I think, was the best offensive tackle we've seen since Richmond Webb. I'd put him over Jake Long, an absolute warrior to continue to battle through those injuries. Him still going out with the boys, coming to Dolphins, like, it feels like he's more part of the Dolphins organization than the Saints, which is kind of crazy, man. So it seems like he really enjoyed his time. And, man, I think Terran Armstead, even accounting for the injuries, was pretty awesome to have here for the last few years.
Yeah, I agree. I want to get your quick thoughts on this. Aaron Rodgers, he is coming to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah, let me get your thoughts on Rodgers going to the Steelers. And then, the whole Jonnu Smith situation. Where are you at with that? And do you think that if there is actual fuel to that fire, Rodgers being signed is probably going to speed up that process? Because, man, part of me feels like, and I've said this, it feels like these rumors have been, planted by the Dolphins and allowed to come out by Schefter and such, kind of leverage against Jonnu, because they know he wants to stay there, et cetera, et cetera. I got a feeling that they're still talking about a contract in terms of Miami and Jonnu right now. Where are you at with the Jonnu situation? Do you think Rodgers coming to the Steelers might speed this up?
Let's save the worst for first here. Aaron Rodgers, one of the players I absolutely loathe. I will say this. He's an upgrade to Mason Rudolph in that offense. At his age, all that.
Yeah.
He might have failed the Jets as much as one player failed any organization that I can remember in my lifetime. Like, that's how bad he delivered for the Jets. And he's going to a Pittsburgh team that lost James Daniels and Dan Moore as offensive line. Yeah. Broderick Jones has underwhelmed. He's been kind of a disappointment there. He's not awful, but he is not a surefire, dominant starting offensive tackle. Troy Fontenot's coming off of a significant injury. The Ravens and Bengals are both better overall teams, I think, even with Rodgers. I don't think it's going to end up in them. I stand by what I said, even when Mason Rudolph. I don't think the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to make the playoffs this year, and I think it's Mike Tomlin's last year there. I did read the report that he was very influential in getting Aaron Rodgers to be there. That shows you how desperate this dude is for a franchise quarterback. Like that, if someone out there is a Steelers fan and wants to challenge what I've heard, but I have heard that Mike Tomlin has been frustrated with the Steelers for their inability to find a franchise quarterback, them being desperate enough to go out there and sign Aaron Rodgers after what just happened with the Jets screams to me desperation in the worst way. Now, in terms of Jonnu Smith, like, it's easy to say this. There's two sides of the coin. I could see the Dolphins traded him, and I could see the Dolphins signing him on a team-friendly extension. And I think ultimately the choice is going to come down to Jonnu, because I do think the Dolphins, if they're not discussing a contract or if they don't have one on the table, Jonnu at least knows that Miami will take a shot, right? I think that Jonnu is going to have to take below market value to stay in Miami. And, that's going to be his call. But I think the Steelers are definitely going to be waiving a 4th or 5th round pick to acquire Jonnu. He actually complements Pat Freiermuth quite well as a move tight end that can operate in the slot. What's scary to me about all this is that must not say that they're not thinking really highly of Darnell Washington, who I just had as a second tight end in that draft 2 years ago, and a guy that I wanted for Miami. So maybe Chris Grier was smarter than all of us when he took Devon A-Chain instead of, right? Or who was it that he took? Was it? Oh, no, it was Cam Smith, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It was okay. No, so no. So he was wrong either freaking way. So, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I like, ultimately, I think Jonnu is a guy that really wants to be in Miami. I really do. And I think he's going to work out a couple-year extension to stay in Miami. I think the Steelers will come in and offer something, and once it gets real, he'll acquiesce and accept whatever the Dolphins have on the table.
Neal, I don't understand the pushback. The guy's the 32nd. We can sit here and say he had one good year all you want, but that's actually not factually correct. If you actually look at it, Neal, over the last 2 years, he has the 4th most receiving yards of any tight end in the NFL, and he's only been in Miami for 1 year. That's number one. Number two, he has the 32nd highest pay scale for a tight end, right? Like, Tyler Warren hasn't taken a snap. He's making more money. Colson Loveland hasn't taken a snap. He's making more money. Like, you can go in. There's a lot of names ahead of him that are making money, more money than him that probably shouldn't. I mean, he's making like about the annual average is about 4.32 million a year. It's a 32nd highest pay scale for a tight end. Like, shout out to Knight in the chat. I always bring it up. Knight made a really good point, Neal. Give him Gesicki's deal. Gesicki got 3 years, $25.5 million. Only $6.5 million of it was guaranteed, and there's an out after the first year in the contract. And Gesicki is the 17th or 16th highest paid tight end. Give him that, because the annual average will bump up to about $8.5 million. So you're doubling his salary, but you're not getting into the weeds of the $12 to $14 million that the Evan Ingrams and the, David Njoku's and all that kind of stuff are making. You're not getting in there. You're keeping it reasonable. And hey, instead of 6.5 guaranteed, give me 8, give him 9, just a little bit higher than Gesicki, because he had a better year than Gesicki has ever had with Tua. You know what I mean? So give him a little bit more guaranteed money, but have that out after year 1. And guess what? If he performs and he's still at a high level, all right, you move money from the 3rd year up into the 2nd year, and then you're basically off of him on the 3rd year. That's what I did.
With his lack of production before coming to Miami, like, it's easy to look at numbers and say, but circumstances matter. He had jabronis like Mac Jones throwing on the football,
Desmond Ridder.
You can't crucify a guy. Like, he was uber talented coming out of Florida, international.
Yeah.
So he was uber talented. You could see the fluid athletic profile that he had. You could see he was a great natural pass catcher.
He's a better blocker than Gesicki. Like, it's not great, but he's better,
You could argue he's the best tight end the Dolphins have had 20 years. His season was better than Jordan Cameron, who we thought was going to be something, Julius Thomas, that we thought was going to be something. He was better than Mike Gesicki.
Clay? I know people loved Clay, but he was better than Clay, and he's better than Fasano.
Right. I mean, he's definitely the best we've had since McMichael, and his season last season was better than
I
any
agree.
season McMichael had.
Yeah.
Just facts, man.
Yeah. But I agree with you. He is the best since McMichael. Randy was a beast.
Oh, I
loved him.
Randy,
I loved Randy. Randy McMichael and Chris Chambers was one of my favorite tight end receiver duos we've ever had in Miami.
Oh, dude.
I loved those two guys so much.
You see that highlight video going around of Chris Chambers that's on X of Chris Chambers? It's like 3 minutes long, and it has him making all these. Dude, Chris Chambers was awesome freaking player, man. Like,
yeah, loved him.
Low key, he's one of my top 10 favorite Dolphins ever. Like,
I would agree with that. Yeah,
when he had all those touchdowns against Buffalo and we came back, man.
Yeah,
like that was like one of my favorite single Dolphin games of my life. But
yeah,
I'll say this actually in defense of the Miami Dolphins against Jonnu. What I don't like about Jonnu is that the timing of him wanting this money, because I think if he would have brought this up before the draft, the Dolphins would have drafted a tight end probably. You know, I will say this though, like, he's doing agent games right now, man, and he thinks he probably thought because recent history would show the Dolphins in that situation would fold and pay you what you want.
Yeah.
They're not doing that right now.
And Rosenhaus has a good relationship with them compared to places like Athletes First and stuff, right?
Right. Because I read Rosenhaus's words that he said is that Jonah really, really, really wants to be in Miami.
Yeah.
Come on, Dolphins, send us a couple more bucks so we can get this done. That's how I read his plea.
But Neal, don't you feel like that stuff about the Steelers was purposely leaked all 3 times, in terms of like they leaked it the first time to kind of scare tactic him. Then in the morning, a couple days later, it's leaked. Oh, the trade isn't happening because maybe they're making a little progress. And then in the afternoon, when he doesn't show up to OTAs, it feels like they leaked. Oh, the Steelers are re-engaged. And yet, how many days has it been? We haven't heard a thing since. It really feels like that was planted by Miami and the media as a tactic to try and gain leverage because of what you said. They know how much, apparently he wants to retire a Dolphin. They know how much he wants to be a Dolphin. And Rosenhaus has even echoed that, meaning he's probably made it known to Rosenhaus, get me some money, but make sure you don't ruin the relationship with Miami because I want to stay here.
Yeah, maybe Mike Tomlin's playing chess, is leaking it out there that the Steelers are talking trade, so Miami signs him. So when Tomlin's the head coach of the Dolphins next year, Jonnu's here. No, I'm just fucking around.
Yeah.
No, I'm just joking. But no, I totally think this is like an agent thing. And if he was going to be traded to Pittsburgh right now, from the time that was announced to where we are now, that tells me that Jonnu and his camp are trying to negotiate with Miami, and the Dolphins are willing to listen because they haven't pulled. Adam Schefter's reported this twice, right? Like, how wrong is Adam Schefter wrong? You know what I mean? Like, that's to me sees like that. There's got to be dialogue, and maybe there's a line drawn in the sand by June 13th. We need to have this done, and a lot of times these contracts get done at the 11th hour. So I would say this. I think it's 60% he stays, 40% he goes.
I do agree with you, though. Like, even from our agent standpoint, wouldn't you have told him, hey, bro, with what they got going on with Ramsey and Tyreek, this probably isn't the best time for us to be asking for money right now. I think it would have been better to either do it way earlier, like you said, before the draft, or do it during camp when this stuff is settled, and you quietly bring it to them and be like, hey, I want an extension, bring it to camp before camp starts, when, Ramsey's going to be gone. They probably either added or decided not to add to that secondary. But you know what he's seeing too? They're seeing, hey, Ramsey's he's on the way out. Yeah, that cap is about to go up to $27 million this year. Let's go get a piece of it, huh? That's what they're probably saying.
Right. And Drew Rosenhaus and Jonnu, read the room. The Dolphins aren't giving out guaranteed money beyond this year.
Yeah. Brandon Shore clearly has won this round. Yeah.
They're hedging their bets. They're trying to do everything they can do to win this year, but they're hedging their bets just in case they don't, that they have a clean slate to move salary cap wise and draft pick wise. Like, read the room. I get that you want more money. You signed a contract. I'll be honest. Again, I'll support the Dolphins here. Has Jonah outperformed his contract? Yes. when people underperform their contracts, do they give the Dolphins money back? No, right? So I'm totally on team Miami Dolphins and Miami Dolphins front office. I don't want to lose Jonnu Smith, but I'm not going to sit there and bash the Dolphins when they don't do things I agree with and then penalize them for things I agree with. Like, I think they're playing smart right now because I do think that they're going to have 3 more guys added to this team before the season starts on 1-year deals that are veteran deals, but none of that money is going to touch 2026. And, look, I don't like the NFL when players are rewarded for one really good year because of the timing of when that year happened. I don't like that, man. I don't like that.
Happens in all sports, though, right? Happens in hockey, basketball.
Right.
Everyone seems to have their best year in their contract year, and then they sit back after they cash in.
Well, it's the first time, taking it a step further, that the Miami Dolphins, it's not the first time, but it's one of the rare times that they show as a front office that they have the guts not to acquiesce to everything that players want from them.
Yeah.
And I like that. I want this to be a little bit tougher of an organization. I don't want it to be like an Oprah Winfrey show. You get a contract. Everyone gets contracts. We just went through that and it didn't work out. Like, as much as I do like Jonah, I don't think he's irreplaceable. And, again, he wants $9-10 million a year. I'm good about that because I do think Jonnu Smith is probably in that 10 to 12 of top tight ends in football right now range. So I would pay him 10 max a season, but if he's looking to get 13 something, 12 a year, I mean, man, if that's what you're looking for on the open market and you really love Miami, that $2 million a year ain't going to hurt you too much.
Yeah, I agree. 110%. And just, I know we were talking about, we segued from Aaron Rodgers into this, just so you know, in terms of Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, and Mason Rudolph last year with the Steelers. We all know they weren't that great in Pittsburgh, but guess what? All 3 of them averaged a higher EPA per dropback than Rodgers. All 3 of them averaged more yards per attempt than Rodgers, and all 3 had better accuracy analytics than Rodgers did. So,
we're going to see, Reason? We're going to see how much TJ Watt believes in Aaron Rodgers because he needs a new deal. He wants a chip, right? Like TJ Watt wants a chip. He deserves a chip. TJ Watt is an absolute warrior, right? Like, I don't know, man. If you hinge your wagon to an agent now coming off significant injured Aaron Rodgers, that's another year older, another year less mobile. Man, I don't know. I hate what the Steelers have done this offseason. DK Metcalf, the trade, that was fine for a second-round pick. But then not pairing him with Pickens and letting Pickens go to me kind of was like, yeah, you upgraded at one position, but your overall receiving core is okay, right? Like, it's not great. We all like Troy Fontenot, but last year, dude, he got hurt, and he was didn't prove to be the first-round pick we all thought he would be, right? They took Derek Harmon in this year's draft. Dude, they were the team that had so many attempts to take Shedeur Sanders that should have taken him, the kind of organization that could have handled that. Like, man, I don't know. And then, obviously I wouldn't have paid Najee Harris big money, so letting him go. But, like, just, him and Jalen Warren were a nice two-headed monster. I don't know, man. I don't know. I just think the Steelers are a team that has plateaued. And I know Tomlin's record is impressive, but I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be an utter disaster for them. I really do. And you're playing in that, like, this isn't Aaron Rodgers playing the AFC East. You're playing that Baltimore front with that pass rush, with that shitty offensive line. Like, good night, Aaron Rodgers. It's not going to be fun for you, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't expect much. I mean, they probably would have been better off, like, just rolling with Skyler or Mason and tanking for that quarterback, like in next year's draft. But I guess with acquiring DK Metcalf and such, they don't want it just to be a throwaway year. So, I mean, we'll see how it goes. Now, let's move on here, okay? Let's talk about, we're going to get into Ramsey, but before we do, we got a bunch to talk about actually with Ramsey, but before we get into Ramsey, Zach Zach Sieler. Okay, let's talk about this.
Yeah, it's a hard combo.
Me and you months and months ago, when the offseason started, before anyone on any platform was discussing this, me and you were discussing how he's going to need a new deal. And we were saying months ago, do it now so this doesn't get ugly. And, you know, I've said publicly here, listen, if Jonnu gets traded, you know, we'll live to see another day. If Zach Sieler gets traded, I'm probably going to go nuclear on them for here because just of how not only great he's been, but how much of a team player he's been with his contract, how big of a leader he is in that room. This is the epitome of a player you want to retire a Miami Dolphin when you look at his story and his come up. Now, I saw someone in the chat earlier said, isn't it partly Zach Sieler's fault because he took less money? So now we're going to, so my response to that is we're going to blame players for taking less money to make it work. You know, are we expecting this guy just to take, you know, way below the cap for the rest of his career? It's not fair. And I'll say this. I know you're talking about handing out contracts early and the contracts we've handed out. Brother, if anyone in that building deserves a new contract, and if anyone in that building deserves to be a top paid player at the position, it's not Tua, it's not Tyreek, it's not Jalen Ramsey. He's still there. To me, in my opinion, it's Zach Sieler. And there's like no doubt about it. All right. He deserves a raise. He deserves a reasonable raise. He's been a great soldier. He watched Wilkins go and get paid, and everyone thought he'd take a step back. And what was the deal last year? The deal was if him or Chop Robinson weren't having a good game up front, our defense had a lot of issues last year. Let's be real. If Zach Sieler and Chop Robinson weren't creating havoc, we were having issues. So now he hasn't shown up to OTAs. Mandatory minicamp is June 10th. We are 5 days away from that. We're going to start to really get some answers. But from where you are, from what your understanding is Zach Sieler holding out on the Miami Dolphins right now for a new contract?
Dude, I agree with everything you said, where when I say everyone gets a contract, there's exceptions to that rule. Yeah. And Zach Sieler is the number one exception to that rule on the 53-man roster for me. He's the best defensive tackle we had since Ndamukong Suh. He's a better player than Christian Wilkins. He's coming off back-to-back double-digit sacks. That puts him in a tier probably of getting paid way like in the Quinton Williams range, and he probably isn't even asking that. He's given the Dolphins a discount already and outplayed that deal by spades. Like, this is the guy. He's the locker room leader, like you said. Here's another thing. He shows up in those playoff games, forcing fumbles against Buffalo, getting sacks against Baltimore. He is a tough. He sets the tone. Everybody thought you were going to see this drastic fall off when Christian Wilkins left. Nah, they put in a 40-some-year-old Calais Campbell, and Zach Sieler was even better, right? Yeah. And there's, Chris Grier got crucified for not paying Christian Wilkins. Well, that might, like I said when this happened, that might be the best decision he's made in his tenure, not paying Wilkins. Because now it looks like that's a lingering injury. And the first 2 years of that contract at $28 million a year, we dodged a major bullet, right?
Yeah.
Zach Sieler is what's constant. It's probably my favorite success story, my third favorite success story that I've seen as a Dolphins fan. One, Zach Thomas, 5th-round linebacker, Texas Tech, goes on to be one of the best middle linebackers ever to play the game. One of my absolute Mount Rushmore favorite athletes ever. Then it's Cam Wake for me at number 2, an absolute stud. And then Zach Sieler is my third guy, man, because what he's become, he's definitely a top 10 defensive tackle in football right now. You just spent your first round on Kenneth Grant. Do not F this up.
Yeah.
We want Sieler and Grant together. That is the strongest, as good as that pass rush I mentioned earlier would be, the Kenny Grant, Zach Sieler is the strength of that defense.
Unbelievable.
Like, do not and I don't think he's going to hold out. I think he's playing the agent game where he's going to show up when he's needed. Look, good guys aren't going to give teams discounts when the agent that they pay millions of dollars to over the course of their tenure are advising them. Like, if your financial advisor advises you not to invest in a stock and you do it, it's on you, right? Like, it's on you because you didn't follow your advisor's advice. Like, that's what it is for me, man. Like, Zach Sieler isn't a bad guy because he wants more money. He's not a bad guy because he's not showing up at practice. And the Dolphins, a lot of people will turn on them. This is a deal that needs to be discussed. It's a hard deal to do, I will say, because Sieler's money probably puts him in the $25 million range.
Yeah,
if we're being honest.
Here we go. Yeah, and rightfully so.
Right, and I'll be honest. I think the price tag I'd want to pay for Zach Sieler is $20 million. So what that tells me, why don't you go out there in that $22 million range and see if you can get something done? I bet you he'd take that, eh?
I bet you he'd take a little bit less as long as it's fair and reasonable. Like, I bet you he'd take, like, I was actually going to say $22.5 million. What we were going to give Wilkins, what we eventually came up to Wilkins and say, hey, we're willing to give you this. I bet you he'd take that, no problem. And he'd be grateful. And I mean, you mentioned Ndamukong Suh, Neal. I mean, we can sit here and say for all the money we paid Ndamukong Suh, even take away the money, just look at the player on the field in the locker room. Ndamukong Suh never put up back-to-back 10-sack seasons in Miami like Zach Sieler did. Ndamukong Suh was clearly about himself, and he wanted to become a billionaire because of his buddy Warren Buffett.
Right.
He was all about his money and himself and his brand. Zach Sieler has been a far better leader, far better in the locker room. Let's be honest, far better production-wise. I mean, Ndamukong Suh, he only had one 10-sack season, and that was as a rookie, right? His second highest season was 8.5 in 2014 before he left the Dolphins. And then his highest sack total in Miami was 6. And, I mean, you look at Zach Sieler and you look at the trend, right? Like, talking about a guy who, 3.5, 2, 3.5 sack seasons, and then boom, took off in 2023 and hasn't looked back. And I listen, I will go nuclear if they mess this up, because me, Neal. We've been doing this show for years. You've been one of my friends in this community for years. One of my biggest pet peeves, right? When everyone was sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows with Grier, I would always say, yep, but he can't get out ahead of contracts. And that's his biggest issue.
Biggest problem. Number one problem.
This is a contract. No excuses. You got to get out ahead of it. Neal, is it a coincidence that Jonny Smith isn't showing up to OTAs and Zach Sieler's not showing up to OTAs, and they're both represented by Drew Rosenhaus?
No, it's not. And that's, there's strength in numbers. And I think that's what you're seeing. And you're 100% right. And the thing about Chris Grier, he gets in front of the wrong contracts. Did it with Tyreek and Ramsey. But then you let the guys – and look, I was wrong on this. They should have kept Andrew Van Ginkel in retrospect. Yeah. They didn't. They took Shaq Barrett. I thought Shaq Barrett was the better player. I was wrong. Andrew Van Ginkel went on, had a terror of a year in Minnesota. He should have got out of that deal. You would have had Andrew Van Ginkel, Chop Robinson, Jalen Phillips, and Bradley Chubb with Andrew Van Ginkel on the books for about $10 million a year, right? So that's – and then I know the Vikings just came out and gave him a new deal, and he earned it, but that was a bad deal. Here's another thing about Zach Sieler, man. He's durable, right? He's always out there. You can count on him being on the lineup every Sunday. Zach Sieler is a lunch pail type of guy. Yeah. He works his ass off in practice. He's the leader of this team. Like, I don't care what anyone else's credentials on this team are. You watch it on the football field, and Zach Sieler delivers. Christian Wilkins, we just talked about, got $28 million, right, left. Everyone thought he was going to fall off the hill. And I know Calais Campbell last year had a brilliant season, and I love him. The Dolphins paid him, $3 million to replace Christian Wilkins. So they got the same – you're telling me with Zach Sieler's production, they got the same level of play out of Calais Campbell for $3 million that they got the year before out of Christian Wilkins. Yeah. You know what? I don't think that's the answer. I actually think Zach Sieler took his game to a new level this year. Benito Jones, great depth player, but Zach Sieler ain't getting double-digit sacks because he's playing next to Benito Jones, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
I actually think Zach Sieler took his game to the next level. And we're talking about his sacks. Dude, he is freaking sensational against the run. Sensational. He is – I mean, and those, third and short, fourth and shorts when the other teams at the 1 or 2 yard line try to score, you always see Zach Sieler at the bottom of that freaking pile doing the dirty work.
And look at his flexibility across that front too, right?
Dude, he's the freaking man, dude. And you know what scares me, man? Guess what the last freaking Miami Dolphins jersey I just got?
Zach
freaking Sieler.
Well, Greg Sosa
asked.
Thanks. Well, don't buy any more jerseys. Greg Sosa said, how many years has he got left on his contract? Okay, so here's the deal. 2025, this season, is his last year of guaranteed money. He has about $2.275 million in guaranteed money. 2026, he has an $11.497 million cap hit, but he has zero in guaranteed money. 2027 and 2028 are void years. So that's the issue you're running into right now, is he has no guaranteed money left beyond this year, and the guaranteed money on this year is it's under $3 million. It's very minimal. That's why he's looking for a new contract. You want to turn those void years into real money. And I mean, the other thing too is, right, he's 29. This is going to be his last chance to probably really cash in. And really, he hasn't shown any selfishness. This will be his only time cashing in. Has he really cashed in on this yet? No. But he's earned it, right? It's not like Neal. We were just talking about this earlier. He hasn't been one of those players that's waited until his contract year to find those next gears and those next levels to his game, right? So pay the man. Listen, I'm with you, Neal. I'm down, okay? You guys made your bed with all this money you handed out. You got to lie in it a little bit here, all right? I get that. But I agree with you. Zach Sieler is the exception. And another exception you could talk me into would be Jordan Brooks. But
agreed 100%.
Me, Zach Sieler should be priority number one. And again, we go back to the Jonnu timing. And they're both represented by Drew Rosenhaus. Drew should have known Zach Sieler's the one we got to get taken. That's the one most likely we can get taken care of first, because I'll tell you right now, going back to, okay, we're fine with giving, Jonnu that $8 to $9 million a year, having an out after 1 year, and really only getting between $6.5 to $9 million guaranteed on a 3-year deal. Dude, their priority is going to be Zach Sieler over Jonnu, as it should be, but it better turn into something, not just talk. Listen, we've seen too many times, Neal. We saw it with Wilkins. We saw it with Robert Hunt. We've seen it too many times recently where they play hardball in the offseason. Then they come to these guys in October. They basically come up to their asking price, and the agent and the player turn around and say, yo, we're already halfway through the season. We're just going to wait to see what the market dictates, because didn't they learn from Wilkins? That defensive tackle market is only going up right now. It's not going down.
Well, and Reason, here's two things. And one, you brought up a really good point on the contract. The paying Zach Sieler thing actually helps you too, because you're probably going to lower that cap hit next year. We always see in the first year of a deal, right? And then the money goes up and you can just push the void years. So you probably create yourself $7 million in cap space by giving him an extension now, right? And defensive tackle is a lot different than wide receiver or cornerback. When you see receivers and cornerbacks approaching 30, because of speed, a lot of times, because of diminishing speed, players start to fall off of a cliff. Defensive tackle is not like that. Like, Zach Sieler still has, I think, 3 prime years on that defensive line. So if you give him a 4th-year extension and put a 5th year as a void year, and you get a contract, and you might screw yourself in year 4. He might not live at 34 years old up to that contract that you have. But those 3 years, those 3 prime years of Zach Sieler at $22 million all in per year, I mean, look, man, he's going to outperform it just like he did the last time. There's people in life you bet on. Zach Sieler is a guy that I put the house on. And that's where, he to me, And he legitimately, besides Tua, is my favorite player in football. There's no pound for pound, I think the most underrated player in the entire league.
I agree.
And look,
him and Chop are my favorite defensive players right now with Kenneth Grant.
Well, he's the best. He's the best player on that defense.
And
There's
honestly,
not even a question.
I think to kind of you touched on. Well, you didn't really touch on it, but you were talking about the Kenneth Grant edition. I think, and I've said this publicly before on this channel, I want Zach Sieler here for a minimum the duration of Kenneth Grant's rookie contract.
To groom him, right? To groom him and play next to him, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Take him under
and
his
I
wing.
think you want to know something. I think we're going to reap far more rewards and benefits than the Commanders did with Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, because I think these two are better.
Dude, and Sieler is a football junkie. He's a tape guy. He's old school, man.
Yeah.
And so is Kenneth Grant. Like, people don't know this because Kenneth Grant is like a football junkie, man. And you put that guy under Zach Sieler's wing. Here's one of the things that have always hurt the Dolphins, big picture, the culture. The veterans on this team aren't people that you can look up to, right? Like, I think we've seen a worse version of Jalen Waddle since Tyreek arrived. Kind of on and off the field. Like, you need strong veterans that can get young players acclimated to the NFL.
I agree. Yeah.
You just spent the 13th pick on Kenneth Grant.
Yeah.
Let him groom into the next Dexter Lawrence by putting next to a guy that is going to make him become the pros pro. It is a win-win situation. There is no losing in paying Zach Sieler. And I'll be honest. I say 22.5. If that dude wants $25 million, sayonara, Jason Sanders. I'll cut you, take that $4 million, and I'll give it to Zach Sieler. You're getting $36 million in cap relief after the season because you're going to cut Tyreek Hill. You're going to do it. You're not paying Tyreek Hill $52 million next year. So the Dolphins are going to have, and who knows what happens with Tua. They're actually going to be – they're in a very favorable future NFL salary cap situation. They don't have a lot of guaranteed money. You know, their best players are young, Chop, A-Chain, Waddle's already paid, Kenny Grant. Like, Zach Sieler's the guy they have to pay, and they have to pay him now. And honestly, as much as I just defend him on Jonnu, the opposite here. Pay Zach now.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, man. All right, let's get into the Ramsey stuff because we got a lot to go over for Ramsey, dude. A lot here. Okay, so first things first. I want to show this to you and everyone here, okay? So ESPN, they came out with some trade offers for Ramsey, hypothetical trade offers. So Jeremy Fowler, Dolphins get a 2026 fifth-round pick, a 2026 sixth-round pick, and cash considerations for Ramsey. Daniel Graziano's offer, a 2026 seventh-round pick, Rams get Ramsey. This is the only trade offer that makes sense to me. Carolina Panthers, 2026 fourth-round pick, they get Ramsey. Chargers, tell me how this makes sense, Neal. I mean, Seth Walder, I don't know what he was smoking before he wrote this one, but
I was going to say, a lot of these guys are smoking something.
Well, look at this. You ready for this one? Dolphins get a 2027 seventh-round pick, but the Chargers get Ramsey in a 2027 sixth-round pick. So we're giving a higher pick to go get a seventh for Ramsey. Chris Grier did something like that. Fire him right now.
They're not saying anything about the money, though, because the only way that would happen is if the Dolphins got somehow.
So what they said was the Chargers have about $32 million in cap space, but more than $118 million in 2026 cap space. So they got money. What are we talking about here? Right?
You're only on the hook for if you trade for Ramsey the way his contract's designed right now for $9.9 million, right? Because we got to eat the money, right? Like, they have to. Isn't that how his deal's structured? So
they said with the Ramsey stuff, they said that that $20.2 million cap hit has turned off some interested teams, but the Rams would cover at least $12 million of the cap in any trade scenario. So we'd have to eat about $10 to $11 million.
I could be totally off base. I think worst case scenario is a fifth round. Best case is a late third. And I think likely scenario is a fourth rounder. That's where
Benjamin
I think it is.
Solik's offer makes the most sense. The Panthers trading a fourth.
And he hates the Dolphins. So, like, that, that's like, no, and look, that's, I mean, look, a fourth rounder to get out of Jalen Ramsey to me is a deal I would take.
I'd do that.
You know why? I keep going back to this. They have a 1, a 2, 2 3s. They're going to have 2 4s when you factor in Holland. This will give them 3 4s. They keep having drafts like they're having with all those picks. They can miss here and there, but they're going to build a deep, good roster of young players. Yeah. And that's what's needed. I like Jalen Ramsey as a player. I think he's gold jacket when it's all said and done. But I will say this. Outside of that one game against the Raiders, I didn't see gold jacket Jalen Ramsey. I didn't see it. His tenure here started with that significant injury. He came back like a warrior earlier than anticipated. Yeah. Changed the mojo of that team. Had that couple, he had a pick in his first game against New England. He had a couple against the Raiders. He was a very good player here. But the Dolphins weren't paying Jalen Ramsey to be a very good player. They were paying him to be an elite top cornerback in football. They gave him a brand new deal that set the record for the position prematurely, I might add, but ahead of when it was due, right? They showed commitment to this guy over and over again. And look, you go to work, you don't like your boss, you don't like the coach, I get it. But that doesn't change the fact that, in my opinion, Jalen Ramsey did not live up to the contract we paid him. He lived up to what we traded. We traded a third-round pick in Hunter Long. Hunter Long, he's as productive as my trash man. So I don't I don't care about Hunter Long. And that third-round pick, whatever, man. The third-round pick to get a guy like Jalen Ramsey, he's been worth the compensation we traded. He has not been worth the contract. How you handle yourself as a professional in bad times tells me a lot. No disrespect to Jalen Ramsey, but jump off the bus, man. We'll trade you. I think he's going to go to the Cowboys or the Rams when it's all said and done. If you can sneak a third, good. I'm all about a fourth. I'll even settle for a fifth.
And I think not enough people are talking about the Rams and the Raheem Morris connection. If they could make that work, I bet you they would try.
Yeah, I think they're the front runner, dude. I think they're the front runner, and I think they've been the front runner since the beginning. And I think Sean McVay's a coach that he respects. And look, Matt Stafford, man, isn't playing forever. Their cornerback room is a disaster. Like, they need a corner big time. He's one there. He likes living there. Like, it's a perfect marriage. The Rams are a contender to me. They're a team that is going to be drafting 25 to 32. In that scenario, I'd rather the Dolphins take more of the contract and get the third-round pick. That's what I would like to see.
Yeah, did I say the Rams? People aren't talking. I meant the Falcons. My bad. If I said the Rams.
Well, I think they're
because of Raheem Morris, right? Because of Raheem Morris.
I think they're in play.
Yeah, they are for sure. I wanted to play this. Listen to what Albert Breer said about. I'll play this audio. This is how he said we could probably get a third-round pick for a guy like Jalen Ramsey. I'll play the audio here.
His name has been out there as perhaps the biggest name on the trade market over the last couple of months. The Dolphins seem ready to move on from him.
I hear you. I don't hear the audio.
They did pay a $4 million roster bonus back in March. Here? That leaves about $21 million left on his ledger. And that's important because I don't know that anybody's going to be willing to enter into the agreement to pay him that much. I am
2 months away from 43
right now.
So my hearing's not as
he
sharp
is due $21 million next year as well. That's a factor in the way all this plays out.
The chat can hear it.
And so the question becomes, because his money is guaranteed for this year, how much are the Dolphins willing to take on to facilitate a trade? So I think the thing you have to look at first is who Jalen Ramsey is as a player. And at this point, I think he still has another good year or two left at corner if you want to play him there. But I look at him as a Charles Woodson, a Rod Woodson, a guy who's going to be able to transition if he wants to safety and be really, really effective at that position over a longer period of time. Like if he wants to extend his career another 5 years, he could do it legitimately as a safety because, in particular in Los Angeles, he was doing a lot of safety type things and was really good in those areas. And moving to safety would highlight the areas in which he's still elite. So then the question becomes, what's the value? And what would he be worth as a safety if you do view him as a safety going forward? And I think I look at this as a fair compromise between another team and the Dolphins. The Dolphins buy a draft pick here. So the Dolphins take on, say, $10 million of his salary for this year. And in doing so, maybe they wind up getting a third-round pick. another team gets the player. They took on, say, the $11 million left this year, the $21 million next year. Maybe you want to rework that with Jalen Ramsey so that 32/2 is structured a little bit differently. Gives you a versatile piece for your secondary. So I think that that's probably right around the sweet spot to get something done. But it does feel like at this point, like Jalen Ramsey has moved on from the Dolphins and vice versa. And this is a real sort of reset spot for the Dolphins as well. Connor and I talked about this on the podcast this week where, we've seen them offload some veterans. Obviously, Teron Armstead retired. And this feels like a natural spot for them to reset their roster, to try to get a little bit younger. They've obviously still got some older pieces out there. But I could see this being the precursor for a couple other trades potentially down the line as well. And that brings us.
So he said a few things. He said he could see this situation being a precursor for some trades down the line. He talked about how with the Dolphins getting rid of some of these veterans, they're resetting a little bit, obviously. But he said the way the Dolphins could probably get a 10th round pick, a 10th round pick, a third round pick, is by eating about 10 to 11 million of that contract, of that deal.
Do it.
And a team who might view, because apparently, I don't know if you've seen Albert Breer, but he just doubled down in that clip. He wrote an article. Now, remember, Albert Breer was the only one in the mainstream media right before the draft saying, I'm hearing rumblings they're going to take Kenneth Grant. So he's clearly got someone in there who's feeding him good information. And what he said regarding, Ramsey is that some teams view him as a safety a la Charles Woodson and Rod Woodson, and they only want to pay about $10 to $12 million a year. They might rework the final 2 years, $36 million or $32 million left on his contract, but a team seemed to be more comfortable in that $10 to $12 million range because they're viewing him more as a safety. Now, this is where I come in. This could potentially be a holdup because I've heard privately he was broached about the subject of moving to safety more in Miami, right, and didn't want a part of it. So, but I think this is what changes it, Neal. He'll play safety if you pay him like a corner. That's what I think this comes down to.
Well, it's funny because I initially when he came out, I had him as a safety in my final draft rankings. And he's obviously was a great corner. I think at this point he's a middle. He's a probably in their 22 to 25 range of top corners in football. I think he could be a upper echelon top 5 safety in football because he won't need to rely on his speed as much as his instincts and ability to cover. So I think if you said that Jalen Ramsey was willing to stay on our team and play free safety and had to eat some serious crow, like I'd be great with him being a safety on this team, and I'd change my tune. I just don't. I don't think that's going to happen here, but I think that makes a lot of sense, man. And I'll say this: don't sleep on the Chiefs or Ravens either, because they're both teams that could utilize him in multiple ways. And if you're going to get him at a steal in a compensation, to those teams, a third-round pick really doesn't mean as much because they're in that window right now. And a guy like Jalen Ramsey could take them over the hump. I didn't include Buffalo because I don't think Miami would be naive enough to trade them in the division. But Darius Washington went down in Baltimore. Like, it's a Raven type of move. But I also think the Chiefs are a team that could sneak in here, for all indications, that pick could be pick 96. Like, if we're letting recent history tell us a story. But a third-round pick, man, for Jalen Ramsey, like, you go into next year's draft with 3 third-round picks, man, I mean, that is exactly what the recipe the Dolphins need to get to this next window they're creating. Because I'll tell you, man, like, I might not have as high expectations as I have in the past for the Dolphins this year, but I love where they're heading with recent drafts, kind of committing. I think they're doing a better job of committing to the right people. And, we know this is a big year for certain players. We're not going to make this about Tua, but like, we know he needs to stay healthy and all that good stuff that we've talked about ad nauseum. But I love what they're doing to build for the future, man. So you get another, treasure trove of draft picks in a really good 2026 NFL draft, man. And, here's one thing that, it's going to be pretty exciting, I think, as the Dolphins. They're going to be in the market for weapons, because Tyreek is going to go. And it's an awesome, awesome, awesome wide receiver group in rounds 2 and 3 coming up in 2026. Get yourself in position to get one of those type of guys.
I agree. And, I've said this before, hey, if you're going to move off of Tyreek, I'm ready for 2027. If Tua stays healthy or you find a quarterback in 2026 because he doesn't, let's go all in on Jeremiah Smith, baby. But we got to get out of here. Just a quick note for you guys. The Dolphins brought back Ben Stille. You might remember him. He's an interior defensive lineman. He was here on 2022 as an undrafted free agent before he failed to make the 53-man roster. He played about 254 snaps the past 2 seasons. So depth piece to the defensive line. Guys, do me the favor. Over 320 of you in the room. Smash that like button. If you're new, go ahead and subscribe. Click the bell so you get notifications whenever you go live. I will be live tomorrow night on Douglas' channel at 4 p.m. Eastern for the starting lineup, so make sure to tune in. We'll see you on the next one. As always, fins up all day, every day. Have a fantastic evening, everyone.